Today, we're cracking open one of the most important books you've probably never even heard of, Francis Bacon's Novum Organum. Now, that's just Latin for the new instrument. And back in the early 1600s, Bacon took a hard look at the state of human knowledge, and you know what? He realized it was totally stuck. He believed our minds, our very way of thinking, were fundamentally flawed. So he decided to write a user manual for reality itself, a brand new tool for thinking that would literally change the world. So let's dive in. You know that feeling, right? When something seems completely obvious, a total no-brainer, but it turns out to be completely wrong? Or maybe you've seen a pattern in something. You were sure it was there, but it was just a coincidence. Well, Bacon argued this isn't just some personal quirk. Nope. He said it's a fundamental bug in our mental hardware. And he believed that until we acknowledged and fixed it, humanity was just going to be stuck in an endless loop of ignorance. All right, so here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to look at the intellectual world Bacon was trying to shake up. Then we'll get into his brilliant diagnosis of our flawed thinking, what he called the idols of the mind. After that, we'll break down his revolutionary new method for getting to the truth. And finally, we'll see just how explosive the impact of his ideas really was, and how it echoes all the way to today. Okay, so to really get why Bacon's work was such a bombshell, you have to picture the world he was living in. For centuries, philosophy and what they called natural philosophy, what we'd call science, hadn't really made much real-world progress. They were just spinning their wheels, stuck in this incredibly frustrating intellectual dead end. Bacon came up with this fantastic analogy to explain the problem. He said that for all this time, thinkers had been trying to understand the universe with their bare hands, just using the raw, unassisted human mind. And think about it. You can't build a massive cathedral with just your hands, right? You need tools, levers, pulleys. Bacon argued that in the same way, we couldn't build real knowledge without a proper method, a new instrument for the mind. So the whole intellectual scene was basically dominated by these two opposing teams, and both of them were getting nowhere. On one side, you had the dogmatists. These were folks who followed ancient thinkers like Aristotle. They'd start with these huge, grand theories and then just try to cram all of reality into those neat little boxes. If a fact didn't fit, well, too bad for the fact. And on the other side, you had the skeptics, who had basically just given up. They argued that we could never be certain about anything, so why even bother trying? So one path led to pure arrogance and the other led to total despair, a complete standstill. So this is where Bacon asks the really crucial question. Why? Why was human thinking so broken? And his answer was absolutely groundbreaking. He said the problem wasn't that people were dumb. The problem is that the human mind itself comes with these pre-installed biases, these glitches in our mental software that completely distort how we see reality. And he gave them this amazing name, the idols of the mind. And he broke these idols down into 4 main categories. First up, the idols of the tribe. These are the bugs that mess with all of us, just because we're human. You know, things like seeing patterns in random noise, jumping to conclusions way too fast, or letting our hopes and fears color what we think is true. Then you have the idols of the cave. Think of these as our personal echo chambers. Your unique upbringing, your education, the things you love, they all create this little private cave that gives you a distorted view of the wider world. Third, the idols of the marketplace. This one is all about the traps of language. Words can be vague, or people can use the same word to mean totally different things, which leads to all these pointless arguments. And finally, my favorite, the idols of the theater. These are the big, elaborate philosophical systems that people just accept without question. Bacon said they're like watching a well-produced stage play and believing it's real life. So, after diagnosing the disease, Bacon prescribed the cure. If our own minds are imperfect tools, well, we just need to build a better one. We need a completely new method, a rigorous, systematic process that could help us overcome our natural biases and finally let us see nature as it really is. Bacon basically laid out 2 completely different ways of thinking. The old way, which he called anticipations of the mind, was, well, kind of lazy. It's where you take a tiny scrap of evidence and then leap to some huge, sweeping conclusion. But his new way, the interpretation of nature, was the exact opposite. It was a slow, humble, incredibly patient process of gathering evidence from the ground up. This was a massive shift from the top-down, I already have a theory approach that had ruled for centuries. Now, at the heart of this new method is induction. This is the engine he designed for all of modern science. Here's how it works. You start by just observing and collecting data about the world. No grand theories yet, just pure facts. Then you run experiments to test those observations. Only after you have a mountain of evidence do you cautiously form a small-scale conclusion, what he called an axiom. And this last step is absolutely key. You then use that new principle to make predictions and discover new facts, slowly building a reliable structure of knowledge, one solid brick at a time. You see, Bacon didn't just write some dusty old philosophy book. He handed the world a blueprint for modernity. His new instrument was the spark that lit the fuse of the scientific revolution, and it would change humanity's relationship with the universe forever. I mean, you can draw a straight line from this book to the world we live in right now. Just 40 years after he published, the Royal Society of London, one of the first real scientific institutions, was founded, and its motto was basically, take nobody's word for it. They were all in on Bacon's ideas. It was this very method that allowed Isaac Newton to figure out his laws of motion and gravity. This way of thinking is what fueled the entire Enlightenment. And today, it is still the absolute bedrock of every single scientific lab and research institution on the planet. So, why does a 400-year-old book matter to you? Because the fruits of Bacon's method, as he called them, are literally all around you. Every time you use your smartphone or get a life-saving vaccine or watch a satellite image of a storm forming, you are seeing the direct result of this one powerful idea that by systematically observing, testing, and understanding nature, we can actually shape it for the good of all people. And that brings us to one last big question. Bacon warned us about those idols of the theater, the grand, accepted ideas and systems of thought that we treat as absolute reality. So it's probably worth asking ourselves, what are the unquestioned dogmas of our time? What are the popular theories, the intellectual stage plays that we're all watching right now that might be keeping us from seeing the world as it truly is? This is for entertainment and educational purposes only.